when we inherited a site or were commissioned to do this building, it was an empty site. 2 houses have been removed, and there were 2 significant trees, spotted gum on the site, so they had to be protected, including their root ball, and that of course sets up that the form of the building has to take into account the root ball and indeed the canopy of the tree. So sitting between this site are 2 boxes, one's 70s, one's late 50s, early 60s. Client's brief, of course, is to maximise the footprint of the building. So we were able to convince them that it's going to be really very uninteresting as a result, possibly, to just do a rectilinear box on the site. And so the intention here was to create as much movement and flow and dynamic sort of reading of the building as we possibly could. And although the building is reasonably formal in the way, it has a lot of the qualities we wanted. So six stories and 2 levels of basement. So located opposite the park with fairly spectacular views to the city and also views in other directions behind, facing north. So sets up. So we tried to get most of the apartments with north-facing views, although view to the rear picks up quite a panoramic view as well.
It's also worth noting proximity to Torak Station as well, so quite connectivity on this side.
So that just sets up. So you can see here how cut into the tree to the side, and the form of the building moves around the site. At the back, stepping back to provide light into the room. You can see it in the section to the buildings behind the building. Otherwise, it's fairly straight up and down.
So all the balconies to the south are also external to the form, and all the balconies to the north are inset, just to work with those light conditions.
So you can see the idea, we sort of proposed it as like a landscape building, the fluted columns, which are structural and also house the downpipes, in some ways represent flowers and trees, and then we set randomly placed balconies into the facade of the building, and they'll have garden beds. The idea is that the gardens will slowly drape in front of the building. So as you can see here, there's 3 apartments on the ground level, but we tried to reflect the form of the building with the landscape and some of the balconies, and also a little bit inside. What the curvature of the building means that you're picking up when you're inside the building view lines that you're not expecting, so you're not looking just straight into the next building. So you move through the building, you can see how it moves around.
Also on the ground floor, we were able to step back from the street, and we haven't created a hard boundary, so we're able to give that landscaping back, sort of mirroring a reserve opposite.
But it's certainly not a case of building to the maximum footprint.
So this really highlights how every single footprint is unique as you step up the building. We can speak to columns. So here you can see the die on the left, which was used to create the fiberglass reusable mould for the precast elements of these fluted columns on the right. Pretty significant size. You can see one being installed on site there. And here again, you can see as you run your eye down the building, each balcony benefits from the column framing the view out.
So you get that beautiful petaling effect when you look up the building, and that's from any angle you get that, so it runs around the entire building. So there's not really a front or a back, and the treatment, which is typical of our architecture, is always in the round.
So here you've got
the depth of the balconies vary.
Sorry.
So we picked up on the spotted gum trees that were on the site, and the corridors and lift wells are all lobbies, should I say, are all spotted gum timber. we tried to get a bit of that character. It's pretty muted palette of just black and brass and timber, spider gum timber in all public spaces. You can see there how we want the gardens to come inside into the apartments, and this is pretty typical of all the apartments. You get a great sort of sense of it being a garden situation, which works well, and also further distant views to the city and beyond.
So here you can see us starting to introduce some of those curves that are a theme externally into the interiors. We've got soft set outs and polished plaster. You can also see the retained peppermint tree through the view, which is worth just noting that although it's obviously not included in our Now There's modelling, we really benefited from retaining those big extensive trees. They provide solar shading to the facade. We actually managed to achieve 7.3 stars on NatHaz rating, which was in excess of what we were targeting, which was only 6.8. Is that our 2 minute or is that time? 2 minutes. So here's another example of setting up in that treetop and using the fluted columns to frame views.
So look, clearly this was an apartment building built for a targeted market. That was the client's brief, and that was achieved. So, but it was actually the building, surprisingly to me, was built relatively inexpensively. I thought I expected it to be a lot more.
Not often what you get.
Well, I was surprised they were able to achieve what they were.
So interiors is a pretty calm palette, just setting the dark matte natural timbers against the brick match marble. And again, just those subtle curves coming into the forms. Bedrooms are fully glazed, looking out over the treetops. Sorry, just want to quickly touch on with that is, although it looks like a predominantly glazed building, we have introduced backpans where necessary for privacy, and that also helped us push our thermal envelope up to achieve those ratings. Also, the facade is a really high-spec double glazing, thermally breakable frames, so we've tried to work with what we've got there.
So the intention there is to accentuate the floor plates. So the floor plates create a horizontal floor plates create both a vertical and horizontal building form and artistic statement, I think.
And here you can see we've got tiled mosaic, which just adds texture, and we've got a really sort of elegant floating fluted vanities. And I believe that lands us back here.